Welcome to What is Comics, where myself and Jamie Jones try to figure out what is comics. This week we start the march to Indie Comics Creator Con. This event is in New Haven, Connecticut on March 15th. We have 150 creators coming down from all over the world. There's going to be panels. It's going to be an amazing day, and I really hope that you can join us. Go to indiecomicscreatorcon.com for all the details. And what we want to do now is we want to spotlight the creators that are coming to the show. And it was a no-brainer to have Chris Anderson as our first guest, because this guy is probably nothing short of a renaissance man. His journey from point A to point B to point C, which is three-headed pig man, is quite extraordinary. And I really hope you enjoy our conversation. Like in Minnesota. You're from Minnesota, right?
I'm from Minnesota, yep.
So what was little Chris doing in Minnesota, like at 5, 6 years old?
5, 6 years old, I was drawing constantly, in everything that I could. I really, drawing was an escape. And I think it was one of the ways for my mom. I have 4 brothers that are much, much, much older than me. And they were basically moved out of the house by the time I was born. And then my grandma lived with us, and she was elderly and needed care from my mom. So my mom was taking care of my grandma a lot. So I think in order for her to just know where I was, it was, here's some crayons and paper, go for it, kid, kind of deal. She later found out after my dad passed that when the neighbors came by that apparently like 4 or 5 years old, I was actually walking around the neighborhood, just walking randomly into people's houses without knocking and surprising them, asking for popsicles. But yeah, I drew all the time. It's just what I've been doing my entire life and wandering.
Can you paint a picture of that Minnesota neighborhood you were walking around as a kid?
Yeah, it's I grew up in a very like Stranger Things-esque time. There were like probably 10 boys on the street that were my age. Cul-de-sac at the end, but we weren't on a cul-de-sac. A huge, huge, huge park right by our house with a lake and a creek in it. It was go outside, the sun is up, come home when the sun is coming down kind of thing. We had a lot of freedom.
So in that time, when was the first time you saw a comic? When was the first time a comic book rolled up? Were you drawing pseudo comics before you knew what a comic was?
No, I think I told this story at IC3 actually, where probably my first exposure to comics was there was a box in the basement that had my brother's magazines in it, shall we say. And in order to get to the good ones, there were comics on top that you had to go through. But so, after I, was stressing out that someone was going to come downstairs and catch me going through this box, I finally pulled out the comics and were like, what are these? And this was probably, I was very, very, very young, probably 3, 4 years old, checking out, I don't know. I've got the first Swamp Thing came out of that box, the House of Secrets, one issue, whatever, 90, I don't remember what issue number it is. But anyway, that was in there, and some Buscema Thor books, and a lot of Archie, and a lot of Classics Illustrated, and those got shoved to the side so I could get to the awesome, Marvel and DC Weird War tales, and so early 70s stuff, when they were grabbing stuff off the stands. That was kind of my first exposure to comics at a very early age. I think when it finally hit for me was 88, when the Batman machine, the marketing machine for the Tim Burton Batman was really rolling out. I think I was drawing maybe some superheroes and stuff in my little sketchbooks and stuff, probably trying to get the Garfield mouth right more than anything, or those, those Mickey Mouse punch hands that are just 4 ovals, trying to figure out stuff like that. And then when the Burton Batman machine started hitting, then I started pulling comics for myself off of the gas station rack. And we actually had a comic store that was through another park not too far away. You'd walk through this other park and there was a comic store there that had, you know, it was the 80s, black and white boom was not over it quite yet, by like 88, 89. And so I was, you know, pulling books off the shelf there, digging through, getting heavy metals and stuff that I shouldn't have been looking at. And, you know, with no supervision, really, I was checking it all out, which is why I like all kinds of comics today.
Yeah. Do you remember the first artist or writer or creator that like you remember their name? Like you started to search that for that person?
Yeah, it was Rob Liefeld for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great. That's
yeah,
a good answer.
Yeah, it was 100% Rob Liefeld. There was something about him at that age. There was something about his cartooning and the energy that he was bringing to, I think, he was just, when I got into him, he was just ending New Mutants, and X-Force was just about to hit. And that was it for me, man. I had never seen anything like that before, having looked at all these 1970s DC books, that which going back now are far superior, you know. Yeah. But, you know, when you're, you know, 11, 12, 13, whatever it may be, Rob's style was perfect for that, you know.
Do you think, and I have had this conversation with maybe you at this point,
probably right,
but the Rob Liefeld, the Todd McFarlane, but more specifically the Rob Liefeld of it all, is, do you think that was like, oh, I can figure that one out? There was a lot of those guys that are earlier that are just like master craftsmen, and they understand how to pull their brush, that thin, thick thing, in a way that really, really, I don't know, I found intimidating when I was younger. And then seeing Rob Liefeld, I go, oh yeah, it's a bunch of lines. Like it's kind of categorically easier to assimilate in your brain as like, I understand what he's doing. Or was it just like, it looks cool? And it does. It definitively looks cool. If anyone has a thought on, if any one of our listeners wants to rag on Rob Liefeld, they can get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll rag on him now, but but you know, with love. Yeah, I think there is something to that. You know, actually, I had a conversation with Jeff Johnson at one point, and back then, you know, around that time, he was drawing Wonder Man. You know, but later, I got to know him as I was growing up, and he is like one of the best draftsmen in comics. He's really like underrated, I think. I mean, and really doesn't do many comics anymore either. But I was asking him, like, why did I love that stuff so much back then? Because I look at it now and I'm like, God, this is not doing anything for me anymore. Well, there's a bit of nostalgia, you know, when I look at the early stuff. But if I look at something that he's doing now, it doesn't work anymore for me. So why was it so much? And his theory was that Rob used a lot of round shapes, and round shapes, for whatever reason, are more appealing to kids. And it sounds kind of weird, but there's actually maybe something to that, which is why, you know, like the round Disney cartoons and the round, you know, when they do like roly-poly-olies or whatever, you know, they use a lot of round shapes for these things. And I think there's probably a lot of like market testing that probably proves that is true. And I wonder if there's not something to that. But then to your point, yeah, there was something with the hatching that was going on in there. The round guns, you know, and just like the weird, you know, it was shapes that were easy to repeat. Yeah. Except for the faces, because the faces, and that was the other thing, is his faces kind of like do this thing where they pull into this point. I don't know how to explain it, but there's something to that, because you're as a human, you're focusing on the face, and that's everything, right? And his faces were really cool and sharp, and with this roundness around it. I don't know. It just really was like a drug for me.
Yeah, I was looking on my shelf to see if I had anything of his up there from that time. But the big thing for me, because that's when I was collecting too as well, is Rob Liefeld had a Levi's commercial on television.
Yeah, there was that too, you know.
And so I was like collecting comic books, and then all of a sudden I look up and I was like, oh my God, there's this guy that does, because comic books were super nerdy niche back then, and like you got made fun of in high school, in middle school, if you were collecting comic books.
Yeah.
So then to see Rob have a commercial and be like, "Holy shit, this stuff is cool now," and it actually wasn't. You still got picked on, but like
Right.
it was cool to see somebody make it. Like there was a very few. You didn't know anybody made it in the industry until you saw like Rob Liefeld in a Levi's commercial.
Right. Yeah, I think that legitimized it. I think that made me kind of go, "Oh, this is a real job that I could do," you know? And the national stage on television appreciates it. You know?
Did anybody point you towards comic books, like art-wise, or did you have any teachers that were like, yay or nay with comic books or art in your like in high school and everything?
No, no. Everything was self-taught. My art teacher just was like the kind of guy who just like fell asleep while you did your work in high school. I did go to college for 1 year, and I remember taking an art history class, and the professor brought up Jim Lee as a legitimate illustrator, you know, and that comics artists are, you know, this was 97, probably 96, 97. And he was bringing up the fact that, you know, a lot of people treat comics and comic artists like it's this like pop side trash business. But the fact of the matter is these guys are pumping out these amazing images monthly at a rate that, you know, if he asked anybody in that room to do, they couldn't do it, you know, and these are master illustrators of our time. And he brought up Jim Lee. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, he was just kind of like making me go, yeah, this is right. I want to do this.
You hear so much of people being like, "Oh, comic books can't do anything," but you know, you have the fundamentals of comics or the fundamentals of drawing are so prevalent in all of comics. You kind of have to be able to know how to structure things out to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. I think that you have to have I think it's important to have all of those fundamentals before you you know, try to really push to the point where you're making it your career.
Yeah.
A lot of mistakes need to be made first, you know?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of mistakes, what's the first tool that you used and then wanted to throw away? Right? Like, what's the thing? Like, I tried to use microns really early on, and it would never get the thing that I needed. Never do the thing that I wanted it to do. And now I kind of play around with microns every now and then, but it's not the tool that I use. Or I was told to use a Hunt 102. I can't use a Hunt 102 to save my life. Right?
Yeah.
So do you have any of those, or are you just good at drawing?
I like to think maybe both. Definitely a Hunt 102 was when I was first trying to learn how to draw comics, because, you know, this is pre-internet stuff. There was I didn't know what size paper I was supposed to use. I was definitely drawing way too big. And all I knew was that like people used a brush and ink and a Hunt 102 because I had that like Todd McFarlane, the comic book greats video with Stan Lee, you know, and he talked about a Hunt 102 like every 2 words out of his mouth.
Yeah.
So I went and got those, and I was like, God damn, these things are like impossible to use. Like I wanted to. I've gotten better at it now. And speaking of learning all the time, like, and things getting lost just to time really quickly, is that like until like last week, I didn't know that you're supposed to set those things on fire before you.
I was just about to ask you that. I was like, well, how old were you when you learned you were supposed to heat up the
47?
That's wild. I learned that like 2 years ago. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, because I've got this container full of nibs, and I'm like, the heck, man, none of them work. What? Yeah. Like, what? And then every once in a while, one will work really well, and I'll love it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the best. And then it just like, you know, I'll forget to clean it once, and then it rusts, and then it doesn't work at all. Yeah. And then I'll put another one in, and it will not, like the ink will not flow off of it. And I'm like, what is going on? And I just get really mad. And then I swear it off. I'm never going to use this darn thing again. And then, now I know. And I,
Yeah, it changes your entire, it's like, oh wait, this isn't as hard as I thought it was.
Yeah, it's because
there's a weird wax on them. For anyone listening to this, the nibs that you get have like a wax coating over them to protect them from rusting when they're in the box. Burn that off of it. Like just heat it up a little bit and they work great.
Yeah, I've heard a million different things. Like you use like nail polish dip it in nail polish remover and just light it and let it burn out and things. And it's the oil too on it. Because I thought the oil that's on it was supposed to make it flow better, but no, it's not.
Yeah, it's wild.
Chris, I found this digging through my like stuff from a kid, and I have this the Simplified Art of Anatomy. Did you get this in a comic book store? I saw this in a comic book store.
I don't know. Who is that? Nope, I didn't have that one. I had the George Bridgman book.
This is Charles Carlson.
Yeah. I had the George Bridgman book, and I had I had like an original copy of the Loomis book, and then I had like learn how to draw comics the Marvel way, and I had comics and sequential art, the Eisner book, and then the Bart Sears stuff in the back of Wizard, Brutes and Babes stuff. That was oddly enough, as like crazy as that stuff was. He does this one example where he talks about a potato sack for the torso, and imagine twisting a potato sack, and that clicked for me, and it really does make a lot of sense.
Bart, so Bart was my mentor, and so like having him, he used to print off my pages and my anatomy stuff and draw anatomy on top of my anatomy to fix it.
Yeah.
And it was the craziest thing because it was literally just like Brutes and Babes. That's not him trying to teach how to draw. That is how he actually draws.
Yeah.
And it's wild. It's fun to watch him do it over somebody who draws nothing like him. Right.
Right.
Oh yeah. All of the same rules apply. Do you ascribe to a certain like anatomy guy? Are you a Bridgman guy? I know there's like I am a Frank Riley guy, but I use a lot of Bridgman stuff and Loomis stuff, and there's guys that are around, but do you have like a methodology?
No, I don't really. I think that Bridgman kind of opened my eyes to a lot of stuff, and since I looked at that very early on, and actually and Bart Sears actually, because it's so big and like in your face, and like nobody actually looks like that, but the muscles are in the right place.
Yeah,
it cartoonishly in the right place. It's there to see, and it's easier for you to put it together, so that when I do go and draw myself, like I know where the muscles are now. I know what pulls where. So no, I think like a lot of the times it's just looking at photos and because you don't need to know where every single muscle connects, because there's skin on people, and most of the time people are wearing clothes anyway. But when they're not, I don't know, like not everybody's ripped, and you don't need to show every single muscle on everything all the time. It depends on the genre you're working in, I guess, but but no, I don't really have one person. It's just like a mishmash of things over time. Yeah.
Can you talk about that jump from Minnesota to LA and like, quickly get into that, how you got to storyboarding?
Sure. Let me try to do this as fast as I can. So I went to, like I said, I went to school for a year. It was just regular college. It wasn't art school, but I took, my first year, I took every art class that I could. So it was mostly art classes. We were doing computer art, was like Photoshop 2.0 O was out or something like that. You know, it was very early in computer art, things like that. But very quickly, the school was a school that funneled people over to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, which ultimately was probably where I would have ended up. And I was learning very fast by talking to the people at the college that once you graduate, you basically are just fed over to General Mills or Pillsbury, you know, or at the time, like the big companies that were there. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to be redesigning the Honey Nut Cheerio box and stuff for the rest of my life. Like that, I can't do that. I need to do something else. So it's this is 97. Comics are in their death throes. After the speculation bubble burst, I kind of realized that, like, as much as I felt like comics were my destiny, what I wanted to do with my life, I really put a lot of effort into learning that and wanting to do that. Well, it didn't seem like it was going to pay like it was just a few years earlier, in millions of dollars, you know, that the image guys are making every month. So I was like, well, animation then, because I really loved like Peter Chung and stuff like that, and Liquid Television really inspired me. And I was like, well, I can do that. So I was in a band in high school. My drummer moved out here. He was the boyfriend on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And so he flew me out for like a winter break. And I said, well, I'm coming out here. I'm going to go to Cal Arts. I'm going to learn animation. And then that's it. So I packed everything up. I moved out here. Cal Arts told me that I was too happy of an artist. They had their quota of happy artists. They needed angry artists. So I didn't get in. So I started my own animation company, did a bunch of intro things for BET and Wu-Tang Clan and like a bunch of different animation things for like a year. That's how I learned that I hate doing animation, and I'm so glad that I didn't go to college for it. And then, I became a school teacher. I taught elementary school and preschool, just general stuff, because the elementary school turned into a preschool. So I had to get credentials to teach preschool. I wasn't doing any art whatsoever during this time. Wasn't reading comics, wasn't doing any art. I was playing music and touring when I had some time off. But that art bug started to creep back in, and, you know, it was like, I don't want to teach. I'd never meant to be a teacher. I don't want to do this. I want to be a comic book artist. And some of the parents of the kids that I taught were producers and stuff, doing commercials. And every once in a while, they'd ask me to do storyboards for their commercials. And all of a sudden I found out that, like, working 3 days on a commercial doing storyboards pays me the exact same amount that I'm getting paid to work an entire month teaching school. Wow. And so I said, well, I got to figure this out. So it wasn't like, you know, you don't get, like, oftentimes I won't, still to this day, I won't get like 3 storyboard jobs in a month, you know? So, like, thinking that was going to happen so fast was a pipe dream. But I started to get headhunted by the public school to take over the music program for the whole LA district. And it was going to be good money. It was going to be a pension. And my wife said, you don't want to do that. You're going to be miserable. Why don't you just, like, quit everything and focus on trying to get more storyboard work and, you know, do your comics? And so I did. And it was the best decision that we ever made, because I've been able to make it work now for 6 years, you know, and I've gotten a lot done in that 6 years and been able to afford a LA apartment. So
that is amazing that you basically went through like 21 years of your life in like 3 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but
I know, but I was just like, when you were like, oh, and I've been doing this for, and I did the math, I was like, oh, we just jumped through a lot of stuff going on there, because I was like, music career, then like you were getting recruited to run the school system music program. Like, you had to have done something to get on that radar.
I mean, just like bust my ass. I just bust my ass at everything that I do, you know. It's like, and I try to be nice, and I try to pay stuff forward, and I think that, you know, that stupidly enough, that is a rare enough thing where it turns heads and people trust you to do things like run the music program for the entire district. I would have been terrible, by the way, because I can't even read music.
You don't have to read music to teach music.
Yeah, my dad ran a whole.
My brother teaches music, so
yeah, my dad teaches music too. So he's self-taught, doesn't read music.
Yeah.
So was Lost Angels like the first thing, comics-wise, in that 6 years?
Lost Angels actually came out a little bit before that.
Okay.
Because I was teaching while I drew that, and I was going to. That's when I was going to Drink and Draw here in LA, and was getting sort of mentored a bit by Dave Johnson, Jeff Johnson, and Dan Panosian. So that was like the big growing period for comics for me, because, you know, when you're, this is all working out exactly how it's supposed to, because had I gotten into comics and had any kind of success when I was in my 20s or my 30s, I wouldn't have been ready for it. I would have blown it. It would have been really bad. My career would probably be over already by now, you know, like, but because I took my time and I really was like approaching my 40s and going, well, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. Because before that, I was always kind of like, yeah, I know how to do comics. Whatever. There's no rules. You don't have to follow anything. You just do it. Well, that's a bunch of BS, because there are definitely, people say all the time, this is a medium that has no rules. Oh yeah, it does. Yeah. And you need to know them, and then you can learn how to break them. You know, you really have to have this like whole general's view of everything before you can go in and, you know, fight the fight and figure out how to lay your pages out, and, you know, what works and what doesn't, and things like that.
Yeah. So you've done a bunch of books. You did like Fallen Angels, Spectral, Chaotic Neutral. You've done things for CREEPSHOW. You've done things for Heavy Metal. You've done a bunch of stuff. And then that's all led to Three-Headed Pigman, right?
It's all led to Three-Headed Pigman, man.
Which is, it feels so like, knowing you for the past several years and kind of seeing the work that you've been doing and how it works, it's nice to see like, oh yeah, comics have rules. Now I'm going to do the weird thing that doesn't have any rules. How do you get to essentially a career that feels like, and this is not, this might sound bad, but it's not what I'm trying to say, but it's like this plus this equals what I'm making now, to Three-Headed Pigman? Or is Three-Headed Pigman still like this plus this equals this? It just doesn't feel like that to me. On my end, it seems like here's this wild thing that Chris is over here doing. Double up size paper and just putting us all to shame.
Well, I just like to make things hard on myself.
Yeah. Matt, do you know that he's not using any whiteout on Three-Headed Pigman? All of the stars are drawn around. It's an idiotic pursuit, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, it is one of the most idiotic things. It has slowed me down ridiculously. Lost Angels, like we said, was like the first long form thing that I ever did. That was with my friend David Acampo, who wrote it, and we kind of like figured out how it was going to work together. We then did Spectral together. So those are two stories that, you know, I didn't plant the seeds for. I just, you know, helped it grow. Same with Chaotic Neutral and like a few other things that I've worked on. So I've worked with a lot of different writers, and I've worked with every different kind of script that you can possibly imagine. So now I've got that all under my belt. Then it was time for me to do what I want to do and bring the fun and explore the way that I want to do it. And I think that with every project that I take on, I change my style a little bit. Because the tone and the atmosphere needs to change for each of them. And that can be good, that can be bad. In indie comics, I think it can be very good. If it's in mainstream comics, that can be very bad because the editor is going to maybe assume that you're going to draw the way that you drew the last book that you did. And that's not always the case for me. But Three-Headed Pigman, after I wrote and drew my stories for Heavy Metal, was the next phase where I was like, well, this is a ridiculous idea. And I'm just going to do this quick one-shot thing about this like stupid thing. So I could get that out of the way so I could focus on my serious graphic novel that I'm going to write and draw myself. But I got to get this out of the way. And as soon as I started writing it, I went, oh crap, this is something else. This is something different than I thought it was going to be. Now, the pages that are out there right now look like big Rob Liefeld, Jack meets Jack Kirby, cosmic wackiness. And it is. But it's going to take a really big left turn. And where it goes from there, I just don't know. I'd love to get other creators involved telling other stories and things like that. There could be auto-bio parts. There could be like tone poem parts. I think it's going to cross genres, as it goes along.
Nice.
Because I'll get bored otherwise.
Yeah. I've started to feel that way in my own work, where it's like, okay, I've been doing this book for 6 years, same characters, and eventually it just evolves into something else and something entirely.
Yeah. I don't want to be, and I don't think you have to be pigeonholed into a certain format or thing. It's always going to look like you, even if you change up your style a little bit. It's still going to be you and look like you. You
are storytelling, right? You are in charge of it.
Yeah.
You have a vision. You are putting it out. So do you? I guess going into the script writing, because you're writing yourself, do you write a full script, or is it notes, or what's your process, or is that also changing and fluid in the creation of it?
Yeah, I think that is always changing and fluid, because the long form story that I wrote for heavy metal, to be honest, was an excuse for me to see how long I could make this thing go before they say, all right, we don't need any more of this. And so I never really had an ending to it. And I think that I sort of painted myself into a corner with actually how to end it. Now I've kind of figured it out since then, and I'm going to be putting the finale of the story out soon. But I was like, well, I don't ever want to do that again. So I sat down and tried to just write a standard script. And that was actually the part of the process where it started to tell me where it was going to go. Had I just sort of like gone page by page and been drawing and making notes of things, then it would have not gone the way that it did, and the life that was breathed into it would have been different. But that's not to say that the next project that I do, I'm not going to do, the other way. I think it's important to switch things up and figure out what works for you. You don't know what's going to work for you until you do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you have to make mistakes. That's what art is all about,
Yes, I think if Chris and I can get on our soapbox for a second, I think it's definitely like the idea of you needing to sit down and draw something and it's perfect, or the thing that you put out is perfect, I think is a ridiculous claim. You can make it as good as you want to, put it out. The next thing will be better. You're in conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
You're in each iteration of the thing that you make. Artists do that all. We have that in fine art. Why is that not in comics? Or why don't comic creators think about it that way?
Yeah.
It's like, you can.
I always say that it's a conversation too, because it's a conversation with yourself. It's also a conversation with whatever medium you're using, because digital may be a little bit different, but when you're using traditional tools, it's going to lay down a way that you didn't intend it to, and you have to go with it, and it tells you what to do, so it is a conversation in that way.
General questions, rapid fire questions at the end of the podcast. They're going to be the same for everybody moving forward. Kind of cool. We're James Liptoning it.
Oh, right.
And we're doing that. So, because this is still an IC3 podcast, and because this is a thing, and you are going to be at the show, what are you bringing / are you premiering anything at the convention this year?
What am I bringing? I'm going to bring original art. I'm going to bring almost all of the books that are solely me or books that I've done with other people, because I have 10 million anthologies that I've done. And I find that they either don't move off of my table or I don't have enough to sell. So I'm just going to bring stuff that is me and maybe another writer. And as far as premiering something, I don't know if I had Chaotic Neutral out when we were at IC3 last, the first IC3.
Yes, I think it got delivered to my house along with your house.
Okay. So right now, the way that the things that I'm doing are going, how's this for rapid fire, right? I don't know if any of the things I'm doing right now are going to be ready for IC3, but I am going to definitely make sure that I have something new, a mini comic or something. I have to have something.
Yeah.
Nice. So at the bottom of the screen, it says chrisandersoncomics.com.
Yeah.
Can people contact you for commissions for IC3 via your website?
Oh yeah. That is my store. The store has a commission option on it. It also has all my contact information, my Patreon. Actually, yeah, and Patreon's a good way to get commissions from me too and stuff like that. So,
because your turtle commission, your Raphael commission that I got from you last year was epic and insane, and I love it. I look
awesome, man. Yeah, I think that was like one of the first times I did the Sewer Boys thing, but I don't draw a lot of turtles. I just did a turtles sketch cover that was a lot of fun. I did it on my channel while I was doing like a live session on my YouTube channel. Just about a month ago, I started to go live every week and talk to myself like an insane person, and whoever else wants to join.
All right. Are you a schedule or are you a in the moment, in the feeling creator?
I think you have to be both. You have to have a schedule in the initial phase of creation. You have to be in the moment.
What is your proudest moment as a comic creator?
Oh, geez. Giving Lost Angels to my dad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Who is your biggest influence?
Your wife is watching.
My dad. My dad's my biggest influence because he's the one who told me that all that 90s stuff was unreadable garbage and I should take a look at Eisner. And he was right.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a good.
That could be a whole nother podcast. Right?
Yeah. Next time.
Yeah.
Next time. Right. When we have you back, what is the strange art tool that you grab for all the time?
This thing. I don't know what it's called. Actually, no, I take that back. I do know what it's called. It is called. Wait, where are we? Okay. It is called a Kemper fluid writer. Tyler Crook talked about this years ago and popped it up on, I don't know, Twitter or some shit. And it's this weird, it looks like a dental tool almost. And it's got a reservoir and you stick ink in it. And it is the deadest flat line I've ever gotten out of anything. And I use it to do all my borders. Better than a micron for a nice dead line. Oh, and an electric eraser. Super important. This has become so important to me.
I've stopped. I only print off my pages in Blue Line because erasing just blew out my arm one year. Yeah. And I just couldn't do it anymore. 96 pages of erasing in a row, you're dead.
Might I introduce you to the electric eraser? It does it all for you.
It's so tiny, though. I need like a big electric eraser.
You'd be surprised, man. You'd be surprised.
Yeah? Yep. Interesting. Okay. I'll look into it.
I would. All right. All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do, man. Chris Anderson Comics. Chris Anderson. This has been What is Comics, where we may have answered what is comics.